People compensate you not for your qualifications, but for the transformation they experience in your presence. This might sound radical, yet it represents a truth rarely acknowledged. Our educational systems never taught us how to claim our inherent authority. Instead, we learn to seek external validation, collecting degrees, certificates, and official endorsements. But consider this: many of the most influential voices never possessed traditional credentials. They didn't wait for approval. They became the source of permission themselves. They communicated from authentic experience rather than academic curricula. And people invested in them, not because of formal qualifications, but because of genuine presence. Carl Jung, among psychology's most profound thinkers, introduced the concept of archetypes, universal patterns existing within every human being. These aren't earned through study, they're embodied through lived experience, and recognizing this distinction transforms everything. This video explores how you can access that inherent power, how you can inspire people to invest in your authentic truth, regardless of formal education or professional titles. Your personal journey becomes your qualification, and that narrative holds more weight than any diploma. I'll also expose the primary unconscious belief preventing people from monetizing their natural gifts, and how to transform it. Let's begin with an uncomfortable reality. Information alone no longer commands payment. We're drowning in accessible information. What people truly invest in now is transformation. They pay to feel genuinely understood, held, and witnessed. They invest in experiencing internal shifts. And transformation doesn't demand credentials. It requires clarity, authenticity, and emotional depth. That is what motivates financial investment, not your resume, but your capacity to create genuine connection. Imagine a 25-year-old who navigated anxiety and discovered self-regulation techniques. A 45-year-old executive might pay thousands for that guidance. Why? Because transformation transcends age, experience, or status. It follows truth and authentic lived wisdom. Yet countless people conceal their truth. They feel unprepared. They question their right to charge. Jung would identify this as the wounded ego speaking, the shadow self. Without healing this internal conflict, without believing in your inherent value, no strategy or pricing model will succeed, because people perceive your energy before processing your words. That is the essential principle. Energy precedes evidence. People intuitively sense when you're uncomfortable charging. They detect when you're seeking external permission, waiting for someone to validate your legitimacy. The unconscious mind reveals what the ego attempts to hide. When you fully embody your message, when your voice carries the frequency of lived truth, it creates undeniable resonance. That is what builds trust. That is what inspires investment. So if you're wondering how to actually get people to pay you, how to establish authority without pretense, excellent. That means you're ready for a profound shift, because now we'll explore the exact mindset transformation that converts your story into magnetic attraction, and how to identify your archetype so you stop waiting for external validation. Consider this carefully. Have you encountered someone without impressive titles, yet something about their presence commanded attention, their story, their honesty, their authenticity? It resonated deeply. That is embodied truth in action, and it is what people genuinely want to invest in. Let's establish this clearly. Your story is your certification. Every struggle, heartbreak, burnout, breakthrough, healing moment, and midnight revelation. Jung called this individuation the journey of becoming your authentic self beneath all social masks. When you walk this path consciously, it becomes healing medicine for others. Yet most people disown their medicine. They view their past as liability rather than license. They hide the very experiences that make them relatable. And that is the fundamental error. Because what builds trust today isn't polish, it is presence. Consider two people offering identical services. One states, I have certification from XYZ Academy with 48 hours of training. The other shares, I've lived D through this pain. I've walked your path, I've healed, and I'm here to walk alongside you. Who earns your trust? The first might capture attention, but the second captures hearts, because we're not hiring credentials. We're seeking resonance. We're drawn to those who've survived the fire and returned with stories that mirror our own. That is why Jung said we don't become enlightened by imagining light, but by making darkness conscious. And that is what makes you valuable, not training, but transformation. That is what creates emotional credibility, not polished branding, but being a mirror. This is where most people falter. They believe credibility means appearing professional, speaking like motivational speakers, faking confidence. But that only works when you're performing, not when you're authentic. Remember this, your pain isn't weakness. It is your portal. Your mess isn't your flaw. It is your magnet. Your story isn't a footnote. It is your superpower. The question is, are you owning it? Or are you still editing your life for professional appearance? If you treated your story as sacred, how would you show up differently? Sit with that question, because the answers already exist within you. Now let's go deeper. Let's discuss what the business world rarely acknowledges, but the soul world knows intimately. The people who transform lives aren't always the most educated. They're the ones who've integrated their truth. Jung called these people living archetypes. They don't perform roles. They embody energy. They show up as the wise guide, the healer, the rebel, the mentor, or the alchemist. And that energetic clarity speaks louder than any sales pitch. They don't need to prove authority. They emanate it. And here is the secret. People don't consciously pay for that, but their unconscious does. The unconscious mind responds to frequency, emotion, and archetype. That is why someone might say, I don't know why, but I felt I needed to work with you. That is resonance at work. That is what money follows. So ask yourself, what archetype are you hiding from? Did life train you as a healer, but you're scared to claim it without medical credentials? Have you always questioned systems, but you suppress it to appear respectable? Do people seek you for clarity and peace, but you still think, who am I to charge for this? Jung would call this the unintegrated self, the part that knows your power but doesn't trust it yet. But when you've actually owned your archetype unapologetically, something profound happens. You no longer need to sell or perform. You become magnetic. Because the world craves authenticity. People are starving to feel seen, and the most powerful offering is yourself. Whole and unedited, every archetype can generate income. Money isn't reserved for strategists or salespeople. Money follows value, and every archetype creates value uniquely. So if you've ever thought, I'm just creative, or I'm spiritual, not business-minded, or I support others, but I'm not a leader, stop right there. You're not just anything. You're carrying an archetype designed to create impact and generate income. Let me show you how, the healer. You don't need therapy credentials. Your presence is medicine. Healers are compensated for holding space. Coaches, energy workers, grief guides, breathwork facilitators. You earn by helping others return to themselves. People gladly invest in that emotional safety. The rebel, you challenge broken systems. You identify problems before others. Rebels earn by creating what doesn't exist yet. Podcasts, movements, disruptive products, radical content, you say no more, and build something better. People pay rebels to lead revolutions. The wise guide, you hold deep clarity and offer truth that cuts through noise. You earn by simplifying complexity, offering frameworks, philosophies, mentorship, whether through YouTube, books, courses, or communities. People invest in your perspective. You help them make sense of life. The lover, your heart, centered and care deeply. Your currency is compassion, whether in relationships, parenting, or work. You hold others through vulnerable transitions. People pay to feel safe, seen, and soothed in a world starving for softness. You don't just make art, you transmit soul. Creators monetize through visual art, storytelling, music, design, intuitive branding. You help people feel alive, and that is worth more than you realize. Beauty heals and beauty sells. The alchemist, you connect the seen and unseen. From spiritual teachers to intuitive business coaches to tarot readers, the alchemist earns by translating energy into clarity. You give shape to mystery. You hold rituals, lead ceremonies, offer spiritual frameworks. And yes, spiritual work can be paid because transformation has value even when intangible. The point is this: you don't need to become someone else to get paid. You need to become more of who you already are. Every archetype has a pathway to prosperity, but it only opens when you stop denying your design. When you own it unapologetically, you need to become more of who you already are. Your audience can finally recognize what they've been seeking. Not an expert, not a guru, not a checklist, but a mirror. And here is where it gets bigger. This isn't just about you getting paid. This is how we change the world. When you've had thoughts in the market, not just speak it or market it, but live it. You give others permission to do the same. That is what Jung he said, the most dangerous thing is the unlived life. When we deny our gifts, we perpetuate numbness, burnout, and disconnection. But when you choose to live your archetype fully and freely, you become a walking invitation for healing. You reflect possibility. You shift consciousness, not through information, but through frequency. That is how we make the world better. Not by climbing hierarchies or collecting trophies, but by saying, this is who I am, this is what I've lived, and I offer it with love. And yes, people will pay for that, not because you manipulated them, but because you awakened something true in them. Now we'll address the final inner block stopping most people from stepping into this truth, their relationship with money itself. Because the sad truth is, many of us learned that being paid for our gifts is selfish, that helping others should involve sacrifice, that receiving is less spiritual than giving, and that belief keeps the most heart, led people broke, burned out, and bitter. Let's unpack that and rewire your worth from the inside out. Here is what no one tells you on a path of service, spirituality, or healing. If you subconsciously believe asking for money makes you greedy, if you carry guilt every time someone pays you, if your nervous system tightens when stating your rates, people will feel that. Not because you're saying anything wrong, but because energy doesn't lie. Jung said the unconscious is always communicating, even when the mouth is silent. So when you carry unhealed shame around being paid, it leaks through your posture, tone, marketing, boundaries, and ability to receive. And people unconsciously respond to that energy. They either mirror your doubt or disappear entirely. So let's name the root. Most of us grew up in systems teaching us, do good, but don't profit from it. Be humble, not wealthy. Money is for business people, not people like you. If it is spiritual, it should be free. But those beliefs aren't universal truths. They're inherited stories handed down by systems that benefit when powerful, intuitive, heart. Let people stay small. Now let's flip that script. Imagine this. Every time someone pays you, it is not a transaction. It is a transformation. They're investing in becoming more of themselves. They're honoring their own growth. They're committing to their own healing. And you, through your gift, are holding the mirror. When you receive money with integrity, you're not taking, you're something, then you're keeping the flow alive. You're allowing your cup to be full so you can pour into others sustainably. Because what happens when you can't pay bills but you're expected to help others heal? You become resentful, exhausted, disconnected from the joy of your gift. And that serves no one. But when you're nourished, when your needs are met, when your work is honored, when you feel valued, you show up brighter, you create deeper, you give from overflow, not obligation. That is what changes communities. That is what creates healing economies. That is what makes heart-led entrepreneurship revolutionary. It is not about chasing money. It is about aligning your energy, so money becomes an extension of your purpose. So now ask yourself, what old belief about money are you ready to? What new truth are you willing to embody? Because here is the reframe. Getting paid for your gifts isn't selfish. It is sacred. Earning from your soul work isn't dirty. It is divine. Your worth is not negotiable. It is encoded in your being. You don't need to hustle. You don't need to beg. You just need to stop apologizing for existing. If this video spoke to your soul, share it with someone still waiting for permission. Drop this in the comments as your affirmation today. I am ready to be paid for being fully myself. Or write your own, something that feels true in your body. Something your future self will thank you for claiming today. And if you're ready to keep evolving and exploring this kind of transformational soul-based content, subscribe to Fractal Wisdom. This space is about waking up, owning your truth, and rewriting the story of worth and value from the inside out. Because the world doesn't need more professionals, it needs more people who remember who they are and charge accordingly. You're allowed to be seen, you're allowed to be supported, and you're allowed to be paid. Now go be who you are. The world is waiting.